Well, as many of you have heard many times, welcome to the 11th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference presented by Northeastern State University. Session today is one of many we have through the end of the day tomorrow, the 14th. I'm Bob Hales, and I'll be your moderator. As a reminder, all of our sessions are closed caption. To read the caption, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is Interactive Learning, Enhancing the Online Experience. We have with us Dr. Amanda Bilvinsky. Is that close?
Good enough.
Close. Okay, my apologies. She's an associate professor of history at Edison State Community College and chair of the Professional Development Committee. And she's going to tell us everything we ever wanted to know, right, about enhancing the online experience. Anyway, Amanda, it's all yours.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending. One reason that I like this topic is because I am one of those students when I was in school where if it was just a person sitting there talking for an hour, I just lost interest, lost my place on what I was doing. So when I became a teacher, I wanted to find a way to enhance experiences more. Now, as he said, I work at a small community college in Ohio. It's just north of Dayton. We have roughly about 3,000 to 4,000 students, and we are very heavily a high school population. So with the new generation, it's all about how can I keep them entertained. Now, that was one thing I wanted to explore when I started teaching history, is, history is, if we go by what they tell us growing up, a bunch of old dead guys that we have to learn dates about and just regurgitate information. So I worked to reform my classes into a way that it would be active learning where students were experiencing history just as much as they were learning it. Now, part of my journey was to go back to school, and I got a master's in educational technology. And there was a few assignments in that program that kind of led me down to the path of redoing my history classes to be active learning. So when you think about what we kind of want to talk about, what does interactive learning, what is this all about? So how do you find materials? Where can you store them? Now, if you don't want to keep just some kind of document with a list, how can you actually have a good storage facility? How can you use this technology in a regular classroom, not just the online portion of a class? And how can this improve learning? So those are the objectives I would like to cover today. Now, at any time, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I know there'll be time at the end, but I know sometimes questions come to us at one moment and we just want to make sure we get it out there. So I want to start with kind of putting some questions towards you. So first off, how does an online classroom compare to a traditional classroom? Now, my guess is probably most of us grew up with the traditional classroom. Now, you go to school, you sit in the classroom, you have the teacher interaction. Online classrooms are completely different. So one thing we have to consider when you're thinking about online, which is where more students are going today, is how does that actually work? So Dr. Alenia Lavoie said, I find it becomes individualized learning and individualized teaching. Now that's very much accurate. Now, one thing about students today is that they really do like this idea of having everything kind of molded to them. Now, it goes back to the idea of entertaining. Problem with online classrooms is that, in my classroom, I can jump on a table and act something out. That's just not possible in online classrooms. So it creates this whole new persona that we have to be able to address. Another question that you can think of is, what kind of assessments do you normally find in online classes? When I first started teaching in the community college, which was about almost 15 years ago now, my online class was what I thought it was supposed to be. I had discussion boards, I had online tests, and I had a lot more reading because they weren't listening to me. Sometimes they had journals over that reading, but it was stuff that was very much kind of repeated constantly. It didn't allow the student to really grasp the material. It was more of, show me that you did it and I'm happy. In a lot of courses today, those are still some of the most common aspects. Even with all the new technology, I've taken many online courses in my last doctorate and in my master's, and those are still the most common things used. Journals, writing papers, and taking tests. So one thing we want to wonder is there a way to move across that a little bit more, and is there a better way to go about it? So I want to challenge you to think back to your education, your childhood. What activities do you remember? Now, we all had one or two little activities that we did in schools that, other than recess, that normally stood out to us. So if you think back to assignments, one of the most common assignments that a lot of us did growing up was Oregon Trail. Now, how many people remember Oregon Trail? The old version. Now, there were a lot of different versions. You had the black screen with the green guy that would shoot the bullets. Yeah, that one is one of the big ones. It looked like this. You would go through and you would play the game and you would see how far you could get. You decide about your food. You would sit there, and when you needed more food, you'd get to hunt for your food. And yes, this is the original 1992 version. So you would hunt for your food, you decide what you need, and you try to survive to the end. This is one of those tools. Now, just like as Ms. Banks is saying, the idea of the volcanoes and actually doing activities. We don't remember the lessons that we were told by our teachers. We remember these activities. Now, some I can bet are very excited that I just showed you that the Oregon Trail game from 1992 is online, that you can actually get a hold of. So that'll be exciting. I was very excited when I found that. But this is the stuff that makes the learning memorable. So one thing we have to think about is how can we enhance education to account for these kind of activities? Now here's the big thing, is that when we look at the types of learners, we have the three types that we can find. The auditory, they have to hear it in order to understand it. Visual, they have to see it. And then the kinetic, they have to actually have their hands on. Problem with learning is that oftentimes we can hit one or two of these, but never all three. So in order to enhance an online experience, you need to be able to figure out how you can get more of these in. Now, over the years, we've come up with a lot of different options. You have the discussion board so that they can have some of that aspect. People are recording lectures to help the auditory learners and having their PowerPoints up for the visual learners. But the problem is still how many people will take away from that. And that's why active learning can be an advantage. Now, I loved when Vanderbilt University put up these quotes. They did this about 6 months ago, really pointing to what active learning can be. Active learning, just like when we were all kids, and it looks like most of us were from the 90s, so we're all good on that one. One big thing is that when we look at it, it's all about participating in those activities. We remember making that volcano. We remember trying to survive the Oregon Trail. In our day of technology, there is so many things out there that we can bring that to a regular classroom or to an online classroom. And the big thing is how it will help students learn. Now, I don't know how many people have ever seen the cone of learning. This was something that was brought forward, back in the 60s, it was one of those big kind of aha moments for education. And it kind of goes with how much do we remember, after a couple weeks of the class. So I always tell this to my students that if you just read the textbook, you're not going to remember much when it comes time for a test. Or if you just write down the lectures while you're going and you don't study for them on a regular basis, you're not going to remember. So this is what I like to look at. So when you look at these, our reading and hearing and seeing, this is what we've been focusing on for a lot of education in past years. Now, it's reading the materials, maybe writing about it a little bit, giving some kind of illusion that you understand. But what really happened is that we don't really remember it. Now, very little of that information that's done by traditional lectures or traditional methods of read this and just write on it are going to be remembered by students. What we have to do is look further down at the lower parts of this area. So watching the movie, seeing an exhibit, actually being present in it, that's where it is. This is where I'm focusing on mainly. Simulating the real experience or trying to do it. Now, these areas when you're actually participating and leading this point, this is where you're going to get student interaction to be much heavier. You're going to see better retention rates because students are actually actively having to participate, and so they learn it better. This is where my interactive enhancements kind of come in, is finding the resources that will help you to bring this around, to have that simulation for a student to actually do. Now, all my classes still have lectures in them, but they're optional. They're going to learn it from other ways rather than just listening to me and hoping they remember it. So this is where we want to focus on, is how can we go from here where we're just doing passively learning and get them down here to actively learning the material. Now, one key thing I also like to throw in there is how do you do that without having to add a lot more work for yourself as well. There are so many things that we like to do, but one problem with a lot of new activities out there is all the prep time it takes to learn it and get it ready and then grade it. There are ways to make this easier, and I'm going to kind of talk about a few of those. All right, so first, I want to kind of go over some ways that you can find resources. So for example, the Oregon Trail. I actually found that in the archive. So some of these I'm going to show you right now, and some I'm going to show you a little bit later in one of my little activities. Now, when I was in my ed tech program for my master's degree, they had us create a digital library, and it was online resources that would work for our classes. So I had to figure out what kind of resources I wanted. So of course I had things like, online books, online primary sources, being a history professor, those are important to me. But I wanted things that would help even more. So I started looking for areas that were already created that hosted all these online resources. So let me kind of show you some. Go to Merlot first. Has anyone ever seen Merlot? I don't know how many people have ever noticed this. Yeah, so some people have. This is one of the great kind of big banks of educational resources. So when you come on here, you can go to browse and look for materials. And over on this side, you're going to notice all of the different disciplines. In this is a massive collection. So you can look down here, you can see all of the areas. You have animations, assignments, full online courses, which even though that might seem like something you wouldn't want to use, the free online courses that you can go into, sometimes you find some great assignments and great materials that you could use. They have simulations, they have drill and practice tutorials. Now they have everything that you could imagine you might want for a course. Going down to the bottom, you can lower it by picking, just college, whatever areas you're looking for. So let's say that you were looking for something that was more like a simulation. You can find the areas that you're looking at. So virtual chemistry labs, this is one I'm going to lead you to later. Now, web elements, you can narrow it by your topic. So let's say that you teach a business class. You may want to look at using the beer game simulation. It's actually a really interesting dynamic on how to enhance the business prosperity. In here is a coffee shop game where you are running a coffee shop for 30 days and seeing if you can make a profit. And part of that journey is learning how to change your ingredients based on what feedback you're getting from customers and how to change your pricing in accordance to that feedback. So there's a lot of different games that you could use in here. Or you may just want something like a salary calculator. Show people on how to look at their financial literacy. You may decide that you want to narrow it down even more. So let's say marketing. You can click that and it'll take you down to things that are just marketing. And all of these are simulations. So you can go through this and look for whatever kind of material you're looking for your areas. So you can even filter down marketing even further to advertising. You can look for free online textbooks from this. Clear out of that. So if you look at some of these, even down to academic support, if you are in an area just to help students, you might come in here and look at things like the academic integrity tutorial. This is something I use in one of my online classes. And they have those learning tools in order to help you understand how to do this. So this is just one of the locations that you can go through and find a ton of different information. So for this, it's just merlot.com or .org. That'll get you here. And there are tens of thousands in here. I know there's a lot of open education resources if you're looking for textbooks for classes. Most of the OERs now are added to the system, so you can make them easy to find. So this is one area. So say you're a science. PhET is the other one, is another great one. So PhET is full of science experiments. So they have university, high school, middle school, and these will be actual experiments that they can do online to learn one of those tools. So the fun thing is that, yes, you can give the information, but sometimes it's not until they actually play it that they can understand it. And I can say that very heavily for things like the elements, which I'm going to show you later. That is another one of those that it's just kind of hard sometimes to understand them until you get to play with them. Another one is Annenberg. Now, Annenberg is undergoing a bit of a change right now. So they now have moved a lot of their interactives into their archives because they're redoing their site. But they're all still available at archive.learner. And so it's the same thing. You can pick your college. You can pick social studies. I have a few in here I love. The political science department just started using a town government to learn local and state government, where you get to be the mayor and you have to decide how to spend the budget to meet the citizens' needs to get reelected. So all of these give someone a hands-on experience on the material that they're learning. And if you ever want to have fun with it, the civics exam is so much fun to watch students try to take. But it tells you over here what the disciplines are. who the audience is meant for, who would be benefit from it. And you can narrow it down more to the areas just over here. So if you want something just with the arts, you can click that and whatever the arts is will show up. Now, a lot of the ones in here are going to be social studies and history. There's some foreign language in here. Annenberg also has videos that you can use. So they are one of my favorite ones as well. And then you also have Teach for Tomorrow. Now, this one I've been using quite a bit to help with the writing area for our professional development. So EasyBib is something a lot of people have used. This one is one that's enhanced, can actually be used by their phone as well. But you look at some of the different tools they have. And even though some of these will say high school up here, the high school apps, I have found that they actually work if you enhance how you're using them. They can still be used for the same aspect. In fact, I use one of the Scholastic for elementary school in one of my classes in order to just give foundation. I mean, their assignment is college level, but it does still give that ability. So when you're looking at some of these, those are a couple of the options. So those are the Tech for Tomorrow, the simulations, Merlot. Archives, okay, so Archives is kind of fun. This one is just a whole thing of mainly games and music. That's where the Oregon Trail is. They have the Roman Centurion, all the old video games. I played Centipede on it last week. So it's got a lot of the old games on there, which can be used for certain assignments. Now, one thing is that if you decide you want to use these kind of interactive, say you want to use some of these books, where can you store them? My favorite thing is to create a digital library. Digital library is something just for you that you can keep updated. You can put your own stuff in. You can design it for your classes and link to it. So I do have a link there if you want to see it. This is a YouTube video that I created for an educational technology class on how to create a digital library using mainly Google Sites. So the good thing about digital libraries is that it makes it so you can hold all of your information in one place. So say that you teach 5 different disciplines or 5 different classes. You can have each class have all of its resources in one place. Now I know some for contract purposes, you can't link them into your classroom, but you can still keep them for yourself. So to give you an example, let me show you mine. So this is my digital library. And I did this during college and I've tried to keep up on it. And all of these are games of some kind or timelines or something I use in order to enhance my classes. So this is the American history side. So you could go to a museum. I have museums linked down here for students to walk around museums. I have things that are games. So Titanic, this is one my students are playing right now in American History 2. The game is following 4 different people, and each one has different access to different things on the ships because of their social class and their gender. So they can learn about social class and gender that way for what it was like during the 1910s. They learn about what it took to get onto the boats because they're actually trying to survive and get onto the boat because they are these people. So you can use this as a way to really put that personal connection on them. So for example, those are interactive games. I have online books. All these are primary source reading materials that I use in different classes. So I can link my Blackboard to this if I want them to get it, or I can just click it, and all of these are hyperlinks to the original source. So then I can just get the link and plug it into my class later if I want. That way I have everything in one location. And as you can tell, I have over about 200 resources in this one right now. There's some that I'm still building, such as my world history I'm just getting started with. But this way, everything is easy to locate and easy to use. You can make this shareable to students, or to other faculty, or you can keep it for yourself. So having digital libraries are very, very handy. You can put anything in them you want. If you want PDF files, Word documents, you can use it as your own storage facility. And I can make this link available to anyone if you didn't write it down, if you want to see how to do it. It's literally me talking to freshmen on how to build one. All right, so now that you get this part, say that you have your tools. What are you going to do with them? One thing that I get asked all the time about is how do you take these kind of tools and make them into college level assignments? So take history. You know, one of my favorite assignments I do is the Oregon Trail. So I do actually make them play the 1992 version simply because the older version is a little harder to navigate and not as pretty. So this gets implemented into my Manifest Destiny lesson. You know, we have a little discussion about it, and then they set off to play this game. Afterwards, they have critical thinking they have to do, whether it's an oral presentation or sometimes I have it as written work, where they have to use this as their example to argue some specific point. So, for example, the role of money in the movement. Now, every character has a different amount of money that they get to start off with. So it makes it really nice to be able to say, okay, let's say that we're playing this game. And you say, what was the role of money in the movement west? You can treat this just like a persuasive paper. Just get rid of the introduction and conclusion, make it a paragraph. So say this is just one paragraph. They have to argue what the role is and then support it with the game being the support. So instead of in the past where I might have them read some primary sources about the Oregon Trail and use that as their evidence to argue their points, instead they can use the game. You know, the importance of communication, relation with Native Americans, all this can be brought in. So when you think about everything that is in this game, that's where part of the excitement kind of comes in. So I'm going to go back to the game for a second. All right, so you can look at the aspect of hunting, what kind of supplies. So they have all of the statuses so you can track how important is it to stop and rest. They can understand and read about people's experiences. But when they're actually playing this game, it's going to make them remember. I mean, look at how many of us remember playing the Oregon Trail in high school or in middle school or elementary school. This was the big thing to help us understand. It can still have that same effect on students, and with their desire for technology today, this can actually connect them even more and make them more interested. So it also helps them learn a little geography in the process. Most students did not understand where they started and where they ended up, and how come this was such a big thing. In fact, I know when I asked students beforehand how many people have ever heard of this Oregon Trail, most students had never even heard of it. And you know, they're freshmen in college and they hadn't heard of the Oregon Trail before. So this is one example that you could do. Now, another example is chemistry. I don't know about everyone else. You know, I'm a history teacher, so chemistry was not my thing. I never really understood how the elements worked, what went with what, until this game came out. Now, even as a history person, when this game came out, I played it for hours and actually learned more about it because of this. So think about an interactive chemistry board. Let me go ahead and go to that one. Oops, wrong button. Refresh. So the way the interactive chemistry board works is you get to learn how to put things together. So we know that if you put a hydrogen with 2 oxygen, it creates water. You get to put some other stuff together, it gets to be a little bit more interesting. So the cool thing about this is that it kind of gives this ability of students who are learning science to learn even more by adding more and more stuff to it and exploring the elements. So like this one, you can learn the elements, you can learn the atomic numbers that go with it. So if you are a science major, this could be the first major thing that really helps you at home to learn how it all comes together. You can learn the ionic acid. This one's kind of fun to see how anything works together. And sometimes it's just fun to keep putting things and see if anything finally clicks. That's what I ended up doing the first time I did it. So you can learn how that works. It tells you when to add something in order to make it even better. Get that on there. So you can learn sulfuric. You can tell I'm not science, but you can practice with everything. There it goes. I knew it was there somewhere. You can practice with them and see what it creates. So having students be able to do this on their own, this is a great way for them to learn chemistry. Now, if you think about what this could all be used for, you know, learning the atomic numbers, learning chemical components. Now, imagine if you have an online lab and they have to go through and put this stuff together and find out what it does. Now, even though it's not that big of a thing, I mean, it's just a list of the chemicals or the elements that you can throw together. It can really help them understand how they work. Another example I'd like to look at is art. Now, everyone typically says, yeah, I'd like to see that someday. Now, imagine that you have an art history class. What if you can actually take your students to the museum virtually rather than having to go and plan a field trip? This is something you can do with things like the Google Arts and Culture. So when you look at Google Arts and Culture, let me get to that. The Google Arts and Culture has a lot of different aspects to it. They have 3D videos that can explain things. They put together historical events. So you can go in and see how it went, the process of it. I like it for the idea for being able to go to different museums. So let's say that you wanted to be able to go to a different museum around the world. These are all the museums that have been categorized and put into this one place. Now, the cool thing is for these is you can actually go and walk around them. So this little icon over here, when you see the guy, it's just like in Google Maps. You click it, and it takes you inside the museum that you're at. So we're in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles right now. You can come in and you can look at the statues. You can look at paintings. You can see exactly what it all looks like, even though you're not there. So you can do this at the Sistine Chapel too. They have one for that. You can jump around and look for specific paintings. So the information down here is just kind of a jumping point to show you. When you click the information on the side, it will take you to it and give you all the information about that painting. So imagine if you wanted to be able to look at specific art movements. Say that you're teaching a class on, let's do Renaissance. The Renaissance has all the different paintings down here that can take you to them. They have some of the stories for them. And the cool thing is that they list them all by different areas too. So if you want specific people or specific events, you can do that. And when you click the paintings, it'll give you the information and take you to the museum so that you can actually come and stand in front of some of the famous paintings. So even though it's still kind of a virtual trip, students really do tend to connect with this because of the fact that they can go and look at the different paintings themselves and understand a little bit more about them by clicking the information button. And it's also kind of interesting because then they can learn more about what other ones are put next to each other. So Birth of Venus and the Primavera is right next to it. So they can do the same aspect and explore. So one big thing you can do with all of these is that you can use these interactives in order to advance some kind of idea. So you can send them to identify specific art movements. Look for specific painters that have similar approaches to how to do their art. Now, there's a lot that we can do with them. Now, this is just 3 examples, though. I mean, imagine if you're using Merlot in all the different areas, you can find interactives in order to enhance any classroom, so it makes it a little bit more memorable. Now, you can say, I saw Starry Night, which is in MoMA, and it's also in here. If you come into the Van Gogh era, which is postmodernism, you will find the link to go to Starry Night. So now we just jump from France to Italy to New York to be able to go look at all the famous paintings. Even though you're still seeing them on TV, technically, one thing to remember is that students have virtual reality aspects these days. You get the virtual reality headset. You can turn these on in your phone with virtual reality and pretend like you're actually there. We've done that in a couple of my classes, and it's been pretty successful. All right, so other things that you can do other than just interactives. Obviously, like Zoom. Zoom is great, love Zoom. There's a lot of different ways you can meet and have student-to-student interactions for online. I use Blackboard Collaborate pretty heavily because our school has Blackboard Collaborate. So that just makes it a little bit easier to be able to use that as part of our classroom. I hold most of my office hours online on Sunday nights because that's when students are online. So I get to sit and have conversations with students. Big Blue Button and Blue Jeans, they do the same thing. Having students build things. Now, I showed you the value that Google Sites could have to build your own digital library. Now, imagine if you had students do things like that, building their own portfolios. Now, say you're an accounting teacher and the student is a 2-year technical student. That portfolio could be the thing that helps them get a job. Now, I had to build a portfolio for my doctorate program. They can be very handy. Other things, obviously Skype, Twitter, Facebook, those can be helpful. I also recommend Second Life. Now, if you haven't ever seen Second Life is a virtual reality website. You download it, you save it onto your computer as an app, and when students go in it, they can travel to different places and they connect as an avatar. So like my avatar is down here, I'm the woman in black, the black dress down there. I was walking into the Holocaust Museum through this. Universities have started putting their campuses on Second Life. I've seen several when I go in there. A lot of museums have virtual life museums. So you walk in, and so like to the picture to the right, that's of the inside the Holocaust Museum for the Night of Broken Glass. You can go in, you can read primary sources, you can listen to the interviews. So you virtually are traveling there as an avatar, and you can make your avatar whatever you want. So just kind of bringing that back, I wanted to make sure I left enough time for questions. So when you look at this, all of these different tools can be used to enhance both online classrooms and on-campus classrooms. Now, have them set up their computers and Go into one of the games. Have them explore the museum with you while you're talking about it up front. This can make it so that they are actually doing it and they're more invested. So that way we can go from having them just remembering a little bit about what they saw or what they heard to actually remembering it long term and having it connect with them. Now, in my history classes, I can definitely say this has been a very high success. When I first started teaching history, my retention rates were pretty average. I didn't have a lot of people drop, but the grades weren't always as high. Since I started doing this for the last 7 years, my retention rates have skyrocketed. I very rarely have students drop my class, and the succession rates of completion are very, very high. Last semester, my completion rate was at 96% for all of 7 of my online classes. So when we look at how these can help, it can really help students connect. Unfortunately, you know, for some, I've had a lot of people who went into my class thinking that they would hate it, liking it and taking another one. I've had several switch into majors, so now they're extending their careers from a 2-year degree to a 6-year degree to get their master's degree so that they can be involved with the things that they learned. But that is the point of education, is not just to get them to their degree, but to open their horizons and see new things. So using these interactives, whether it's a simulation, putting those tutorials up there for students who are having trouble learning so they can experience it a little better, it will advance your classroom and make it so students are not only understanding the material, but really able to remember the material and have it stick with them through their career. So I kind of want to make sure I left enough time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Any questions?
Well, let's see. Sometimes they're slow typists if they're going to put something in the chat.
No problem. How do you ensure accessibility of simulations you choose? That's one thing that you gotta always watch. Some of them can have some of that issue. Most of the stuff that goes on Merlot, they do get checked for it. So for example, one of the games that I have on there, the Oregon Trail, it does have a CC option. If the student has a disability and needs it, they can actually activate it. What's my Second Life avatar name? I'm very simple. My avatar name is Mandolin because it's my writing name. But with a lot of the things that you're going to find out there, you know, let me kind of show you one that's really kind of showing the direction we're going. So one of the new ones that a lot of programs are moving to is things like this. So this is Mission US. I use these in my history classes pretty heavily for my American history. Each one of these, you will be that character trying to survive. They have the game created so that it's already set up for the accessibility. So you can hear them say it, or you can read it on the screen. So it does go through both. And they do have it contact in these, a lot of these now, so that you can ask for help if you need it. And they can download it to specific accessibility apps. So they're really starting to move into the way for accessibility as much as they can. And let me put that back up. So someone was saying about, so the video, in case you want to see how to create the digital digital library to save your stuff, I have that right there. If anyone would like a little bit more to see my digital library, just let me know and I'm happy to share it. I haven't updated it for a while. I have a list of updates I need to put to it, but it really does help in order to save all this kind of information as you're going through finding it. And I say take an afternoon and just play around on it sometime. You would be amazed at the stuff that you'll find out there that you just didn't know existed. And as you can tell from my digital library, I have hundreds of things in there that I had no idea before I started making that they existed. So my classes are fully interactive, playing these games all the time now. All right. Any other questions? All right. I guess thank you all for coming and ending a little earlier.
I think they liked it.
I hope so. And if anyone ever wants my information, here, I can put my information at the end, I think. There. Feel free to contact me anytime. I do, I've been building people's curriculum for them for a while, so I've been adding stuff in constantly. And if there's something specific you're looking for, send me an email and I'll help you find it.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda. This is really great.
All right, well, thank you for having me.